Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am so glad that you've joined me today. As always, I have another great guest on today that I think you are going to be really encouraged by. She is a new friend of mine. Her name is Nicki Truesdell, and she recently wrote a book that I think so many of us are going to be able to relate to. And the title of the book is called Anyone Can Homeschool. And in this book, she talks about overcoming obstacles to home education because there are so many of them. And I know that we are in a place in our country right now where parents are a little bit worried and they're thinking, well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not educated as a teacher. I don't have the patience. I don't have what it takes to homeschool my kids. And so Nicki has a pretty incredible testimony about this. And so we're going to talk about that today. Nicki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here with me. Tell us a little bit about you and your family, and then I would love for you to kind of start off by sharing some of your testimony with us because it's pretty powerful when it comes to homeschooling.
Sure. Well, I live in Texas and I have a husband and 5 children. 2 of my kids are grown and graduated from a lifetime of homeschooling, 2 daughters. And I have 3 more children that still live at home. And so they are 9, 12, and 14. And so those are the 3 that I'm homeschooling. And I also help my sister. She's a single mom. And so I help and tutor her kids. And a couple times a week, the kids of another single mom friend of mine. And so sometimes I have an actual one-room schoolhouse going on in my living room.
I love that.
But I love to teach. I've always loved school. I've always loved homeschooling. So it's kind of fun for me to add everybody into our lessons. So I'm a second generation homeschooler, actually. My mom and dad took us, my sister and I, out of school when I was 11. So that was in 1983. And they homeschooled us when there was hardly a homeschool movement. It was just kind of picking up at that time. And homeschooled from the 6th grade to the 11th grade. And then I did attend a private school for my senior year with friends who asked me, why don't you come with us? So I did that. Anyway, then I went into college and got a bachelor's degree in business, worked for a few years. And then when I had kids, I became a full-time mom. And so there was really never any question for me whether I would homeschool my kids because I really enjoyed being homeschooled. And I also already had the conviction that it was best for my kids. And so we just naturally went into it. But as my book states, I know it's kind of a bold title because a lot of people say not everyone can homeschool, but I came up with that title because I'm always telling people, yes, anyone can do this. And then I tell my story. And basically, the short version is that when my oldest daughter was almost 6, I ran away from an abusive husband. We kind of just left in one day and took what we could take and went to live somewhere else. And so it was kind of a drastic change in our lives. I had 2 little girls. And typically, when something like that happens, the first thing everyone says is, well, I guess you'll put your kids in school now. And I said, no, that never crossed my mind. My thought was, how do I keep homeschooling? What am I going to do now? And so obviously it was a struggle, financially, time-wise, all of that. It's a whole lot different than having a comfortable home with a happy marriage and a nice income.
Sure.
But I had the conviction overall that this was what was best for my kids. And so it was just time to figure out how to make it happen. And so I have been a single, working, very broke homeschool mom. And at that time, my girls were 6 and 2. So, I had a toddler and a kindergartner, and we did it. We made it work all kinds of different ways, and it didn't look normal at all, but we did it. And then on through the years, I experienced a lot of other things that people experience, like multiple moves and chronic illness. I've had migraines my whole life and tried everything, but sometimes you just deal with something for your whole life, and that's how migraines have been for me. And so obviously that's very disruptive to a nice school schedule. I've had multiple times where I worked part-time to help with the budget, or we had no budget. I've had small house, big house, I can't even remember all the things that I wrote in the book now, but all those obstacles that make someone think, well, this is going to mess things up. I can't homeschool. I did it. And I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to conquer this. It was just life. And, one day at a time, I learned, oh, I can do it this way. I can teach my kid to read without a curriculum. I can homeschool even though I have this horrible morning sickness that's going to last for 3 months, and actually no one's having school. And I learned so much about education, so much about raising children through all of that. And so I finally just started telling people, oh, yes, you can homeschool. Let me tell you how, let me tell you how it works. And the main thing is rethinking education. The whole thing, everything we know about education in this country is just one method, and it's not always the best one. And so that's the first 2 chapters of my book deal with getting people to understand there's so much more to education than the typical classroom that we know. That's why I like the name of your ministry, Schoolhouse Rocked, because you are just kind of blowing everything that you've ever known out, and you start over with a whole, like a blank slate on what education really is.
Yes, yes. Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about just kind of rethinking school. And I love your testimony, and I love the title of the book, Anyone Can Homeschool, because that's really what we try to get people to understand. Everyone has a reason why they think they can't homeschool. Every single mom I've ever met, except for one, who I've talked about her before. She had her doctorate in education and wrote her dissertation on homeschooling. I was like, okay, you win the prize. You can homeschool.
Yes, yes.
But everyone has their insecurities, every mom in the world. And they're not all just insecurities. I mean, for some people like yourself, there are real reasons why you feel like you can't or shouldn't homeschool, and certainly why other people around you feel like you can't or shouldn't homeschool.
Yeah,
and
there's whether struggles.
oh yeah. I mean, you can get tons of opposition from people. You're not educated. You're a single mom. You have an illness. You have all of these things preventing you. But here's what it comes down to: if the Lord's calling you to do this, He's going to provide a way for you to do this. And so I love that about your book, is that you point people back to Scripture and back to saying, God is faithful. He is going to equip you with all that you need in order to accomplish His will. And it's not going to look perfect. It's going to be messy. You're going to have hard days. But you talked about, take it one day at a time. And that's exactly it. I don't have a ton of obstacles in my way right now for homeschooling. I have a husband who is home actually with me during the day. I mean, he works, but he's home. And so he helps me with raising the children and with discipline and stuff. I do the school part with them, but he's here for that. And, my kids are healthy and I'm healthy. My husband's healthy. And we, things are moving pretty well for us overall. We have our struggles too. But even with that, I still wake up often just feeling like, I can't do this. This is so hard. And I'm messing it all up. And I do a homeschool podcast. I'm making a movie about homeschooling. Like, my whole world is homeschooling. And I feel often I feel like this is just hard. Like, I am just screwing it up.
I do too. Yes. Yeah. I've got years behind me showing me that it's possible. And I still some days think, oh, this poor kid, I'm messing him up. I'm doing this wrong. But you're not. That's the thing. And then I have to remind myself what I tell others. You're not.
Right. Well, and I think that, you think about Eve in the garden and the serpent coming and just making her believe those lies. And that's exactly what he does with us. He wants us to believe the lies. He wants us to believe that we're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not well enough equipped to be able to teach our children that God gave us. He gave us our kids for a reason. And so let's talk a little bit about rethinking school, because that's actually the first chapter in your book. What do you mean by rethinking school?
Well, I say this is the most important chapter before you read any of the others, because you've got to get this part down. And what I mean by that is just taking your experience in the American public school system and acting like you never heard of that before, and thinking, what does a kid actually need? And it's kind of scary, because we all think, well, I don't know, I just do what the teachers told me, or my kids do what the teachers said or the school district says. But we actually have everything we need within us to educate children. And so we have to realize that it doesn't take 12 years and it doesn't take 5 days a week of 7 or 8 hour days.
Right.
It does not take a certified teacher. It doesn't take a classroom with a desk and a chalkboard. I mean, all those things are great, except for the overkill on the time. I will tell you that it's not necessary. But we've just been so trained to think that's what school is. And so that's what I really want people to understand is that's one way. That's not what all school is. And it wasn't even the way of the world until about the 20th century, late 19th century. The world did not educate its children this way. And so somehow we still made it through thousands of years and awesome inventions and discoveries and really smart people without this modern public education. And so that's what we have to realize is that this is something I say, and I've had people already quote me on it. If you can read, you can teach.
Right.
You've got some books. That's the start. And so everything else is just figuring out how your kids learn, what is your budget, what age, what grade your kids are, what do you need them to know to become functioning adults in society. And so, I mean, obviously a lot of this work has been done for us, but just starting to think, maybe my child can't do a math worksheet at 5 years old, or maybe my kid's not going to read at 5. Maybe they'll read at 7 or 8. That's okay.
Right.
They're actually not messed up. Or, you don't have to have 12 years in a row of grammar workbooks, really. As long as you take the time to learn proper grammar, you don't have to do it every year. I've had people get so upset when I show my homeschool schedule, and one time there wasn't science on it. And they thought, and I just want to say, you don't have to do science every year for 12 years. You don't have to have a science workbook, but you can if you want to. It's just thinking outside the box and thinking, well, what does an actual human need?
Right.
That's what you do. And you start there. And last night we had a support meeting here in my local area. And my aunt, who was also one of these 80s homeschoolers, was there, and she spoke. And she said, I always start backwards. I start at what kind of product do I want? What kind of kid do I want to send off into the world? And I work my way backwards. So if this is what I want, how do I get there? And just think outside the schoolroom and figure out how am I going to get there. And you don't have to do it by yourself either. It sounds like, okay, create a plan. There's lots of great help out there to do this.
Yeah. I love that concept of thinking backwards, because you think about when you're heading somewhere, thankfully now we have GPS.
Yes.
I don't know how people survived without GPS before. I mean, I did.
And I was there, but yeah.
Right. I was too. I mean, I drove for, many years before GPS came out.
Yes.
I don't know how I ever found anywhere
paper with some notes in your car.
Exactly. But I have a terrible sense of direction. And so I don't know how I survived. Thank the Lord for GPS. But when you're headed to a destination, you put the destination in first, and then you figure out the route you're going to take to get there.
That's right.
And that's exactly how it is with homeschooling. You have to figure out, and for us, of course, our main goal is that our girls will love Jesus and serve him with their whole hearts. That is our goal in education. And so everything that we teach in our homeschool, we want those things to somehow lead them to that. It's not just teaching for the sake of teaching and checking off a box. Exactly. It's teaching with the intention of leading them towards their creator and their savior. Yes. So such good stuff. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back in a minute. There's some kind of it sounds like I don't know where your microphone is, but something is rubbing. Not this minute, but when you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. It might have just been my seat. I'll try to be careful.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like that.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be careful about that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what it sounds like, something close to your microphone. But I'm not sure where your mic is or what that is. So that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's my seat.
Okay, your mic's picking it up, so that's okay. Anyway, all righty. Let me take a quick drink and then I'll get back in. Okay. 1 second. All right. We are back with Nikki, and we were talking about how anyone can homeschool. So we were talking about rethinking school and about taking the end goal in mind and working backwards from that. and there are so many reasons why people think that they can't homeschool. And so one of the things that you talk about in your book is teaching on a budget. Oftentimes we feel like, we can't afford it. And there are kind of two sides to that. One, you just simply can't afford the curriculum. You can't afford the extracurricular activities. And then there's also the parents who say, well, I can't afford to take time off work. I can't afford to not work. And that's a real obstacle. It truly is. So talk to that parent who's feeling like they literally can't afford to homeschool. They have no other choice but to put their children in the public school system.
Okay. Well, one thing I think a lot of people have a misconception is about the cost of the actual curriculum. Because if you were going to do a private school, then you're looking at a pretty hefty price tag. And so I think people think, well, gosh, it's so expensive to teach your kids. It can be if you buy all the bells and whistles and the biggest curriculum package, you could spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but you don't have to. And that's one of the things I learned kind of through trial and error and just out of necessity over the years was that it doesn't take anything fancy. And I actually taught my second child to read around 8 years old, so later than normal because of my life. And then I also used only a $3 used handbook for reading from Rebecca, and everything else I found on the internet and just kind of did. It takes more work. If you don't have the money to buy stuff, obviously you're going to have to put a little bit more time into it. But I had the time. I just didn't have the money at the time. So, the internet is a wonderful treasure trove of everything you could possibly want to teach your kids. And, I have a love-hate relationship with the internet, but wow, if you have the internet, you've got pretty much everything you could think of. But I also know that for some people, there is the whole, well, we live on 2 incomes and this is how we live. And I don't know how I could drastically jump to 1 income. And I do have a chapter in my book about that. And I've interviewed 3 different families who did give up that second income. And it is an adjustment period. There is a lot to reconsider, but I think we get into a certain kind of lifestyle and don't realize there are things that we could do without. And I'm not talking about just your daily coffee, but big things we can do with that. And sometimes it means a life adjustment. I mean, I've known people who sold their house, moved into something less expensive. Lots of people have changed their lifestyle and the cars they drive and the vacations they take and all that because they were definitely convicted that this was what God wanted them for their children. And so, yeah, there are sacrifices involved sometimes. But, you have to have what I call the why. And this applies to almost any situation. If you know why you want to homeschool your children, then write that down, write your convictions on paper, and it's going to come back and encourage you when you're thinking, man, I'd like to go on a cruise this year, but I'm not going to because we've chosen a different life for our family. But I also know people that work and homeschool. I did it because I had to, when I was a single mom. And I will tell you, there's no right way. There's no one method or formula for working parents who homeschool or single parents who homeschool. What it is, again, is understanding what education is and all the different ways it can be accomplished, and then fitting that into your lifestyle, whether you're a single parent and you've got to work full time, or you are a married couple and maybe you'd like to transition to 1 income, or you've got 2 incomes that you desperately need. I know people in all these situations, and what they do is figure out, okay, how am I going to give my kid an education in this life that I'm living right now? And so for people who don't give up that second income, they just work with their schedule. Maybe they find a certain job opportunity that fits better. It's hard to say, here's how you do it. It's a mindset. And then it's looking at everything through this new lens of my first priority is to educate my children. Now, what else do I do?
Right. Yeah, I love it. And the Lord will provide a way. He always does. Yeah. He's faithful. And he will, if we're intentional about it, and sometimes that means, sitting down with your spouse, or if you're a single parent, sitting down, maybe with your pastor, or
Mm-hmm.
assuming that your pastor is pro homeschool,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
maybe your parents, or a close friend or family member, and just saying, help me look at this. I know that there have been oftentimes in my life where I feel like I'm just kind of in a rut, and I need to remove myself
Mm-hmm.
from the middle of it in order to see
Yeah.
clearly from the outside how to make something work.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to other people who I respect, and just saying, this is just not working, and I don't know how to make it happen. I don't
Yeah.
know how to overcome this obstacle. And so having someone else who's wise from the outside
Mm-hmm.
look at it and say, you know what, well, here's what I see, and here are some changes that maybe you could implement.
And then
And
be willing to at least consider those, because
right.
it's that money thing is very personal, and we kind of
Yes.
get a little offended if someone says, "Oh, well, maybe you don't need that." It's
Right.
so touchy, but you do
Right.
have to just be open and think, what is my priority here?
Right, right. And it's all about priority. That's absolutely right. So we are out of time for this episode. Let's close this one out, and let's come back on Wednesday and continue talking about Anyone Can Homeschool, your new book that you've written. Where can people find out more about you, Nikki?
I have a website, NickiTruesdell.com, and I blog about mostly homeschooling, but also Christian parenting and everything under that umbrella. And
All
I'm
right.
also on Instagram and Facebook too.
Okay, sounds great. We will put all of those links in the show notes, and we will put a link to the book as well. It's called Anyone Can Homeschool: Overcoming Obstacles to Home Education. We will be back on Wednesday to continue this conversation. Have a great day. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. That was great. Let's do. Okay. So part two, let's talk about special needs. Do you have a special needs child? Is that
I
something
do
that
not.
you do
That's
not?
the
Okay.
that's probably the one chapter where I don't actually have my own experience.
Okay. Are you able to comfortably talk about the chapter and the experiences that you wrote about?
Yes, I
Okay.
I can. And normally what I do there is, mention the people that I know, the people that I interviewed, and then just again talk about thinking outside the
Okay.
box.
Okay. Are you familiar with Peggy Ployer from SPED
Oh,
Homeschool?
oh yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
She's in Texas too. She's Texan.
Yeah, a lot of people are. I just don't
Yeah.
meet them all.
I know there's a lot of great people out there. Because she's another one. I did a podcast with her, so we can actually link
Okay,
back to
yeah,
that
that'd be
podcast as
great.
well.
I do actually have another story to tell that from a really good friend of mine that's not in the book. I tried to get an interview with her, and some people just didn't follow up, but she has a really great story that I can share too.
In regards to special ed,
Special ed.
needs
Uh-huh.
homeschooling. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Awesome. Well, let's talk about that. And then let me look really quickly. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Give me a second.
All right.
Okay. All right. You good?
I am.
Okay. Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast, and welcome back to my second interview with Nicki Truesdell. She is the author of Anyone Can Homeschool: Overcoming Obstacles to Home Education. This is a new book that she's written, and it's such a good book. I love it when homeschool moms write books, because they have been through something, and they know that whatever situation they've been through, the Lord can use that in order to be an encouragement to other homeschool families. And so I think you had said your husband actually is the one who encouraged you to write
He
this book,
did. Yes.
which is
I
awesome.
laughed.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
I laughed, and he said, "You should call it Anyone Can Homeschool," because he heard me say it all the time, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's so funny."
How long did
And
it
then
take you to
after
actually write it after he suggested it?
it didn't take long for me to think, you know what, that is a good idea. It's faster, it's easier than typing these comments in every discussion I ever have.
Right.
I'll just put it down in a book. And so just a few months later that I really got it going. So I actually started this book 3 years ago and
Okay.
just kind of took my time. But it's so funny that this year there's so many more people actually looking into it. So
Yes, yes. God's timing is so perfect
it is.
for all of these things, especially when we are doing what He's called us to do. And so I
Yeah.
love that you've put this book out and written it and published it. You talked about in the first part that you're a second generation homeschooler. You were a single homeschool mom for quite some time. And we've talked a little bit about that and how the Lord kind of brought you through that. And I want to kind of park there for a little while. How kind of talk about what it was like for you. And I know that you just figured out a way, but can you give a little bit more detail about what was going on in your world? You know, we have had a lot of people reach out to us in regards to being a single homeschool parent. And that can happen in a variety of ways. You know, sometimes it's the husband walks away. Sometimes, like in your situation, you had to walk away from a abusive husband. There are some, of course, who lose their husbands unexpectedly.
Yes.
You know, whether through an illness or car wreck or a million different ways.
Yeah.
And they all of a sudden find themselves as single homeschool parents, because it's not always the moms. Oftentimes it's the dads who lose their wives, and they end up with these children who they have a conviction to homeschool, but they're not exactly sure how they're going to make that work. So can you give a little bit more detail on your experience and how the Lord got you through that time?
Yes. And I want to start by saying when I chose to homeschool, it was before I was a single mom. So I was already very dedicated to the idea. And when I became single, I was already going to do it. It never crossed my mind, but of course people will keep saying to you, "Oh, well, you don't have time for that." But we had been through something pretty traumatic, my daughters and I, and the last thing I wanted to do was take them from their home that they'd always known and also put them in the care of strangers all of a sudden for the first time in their lives. And so I thought, if anything, going through this divorce is already very difficult for them. I don't want to make it worse by getting up every morning and saying, "Oh yeah, and also I'm going to drop you off at this daycare and the public school,
Right.
and I'll see you tonight." And so I wanted to be there for them because it was hard, and I wanted to be there with them when they cried, or little kids feel emotions and they don't even know how to share them, but they just have them. And I wanted to be there with them. I wanted to be the one that experienced that, or let them sleep in, or let's just take a walk to the park. I mean, we fed ducks every day for a very long time at the park. That's what we did. And I'm not saying it made things easier, but it made it doable. And it was like I was their counselor, and I was their not just their teacher. It was so much more. It was me being their mom full time, especially through a difficult time. And so, of course, the first thing a single parent has to think about is, how am I going to provide? You have to eat. And there were some very, very slim times for us when I didn't have money from one day to the next, and I was hoping tomorrow would look better. And because I wanted to raise my kids full time, it made job hunting harder. It just does. There's no way around that. And this was before there was a lot of work at home opportunities. And so I just managed one way after another. This job, that job, took them with me. My mom would help when she was available, but she wasn't always. They lived out of town. We just kind of scrambled and survived. It's not a beautiful story of, this mom makes a fabulous income working from home. I didn't do that. We just survived, and I had ruined my credit rating, and I had no money, but none of that matters. I mean, that was 20 years ago. And I can tell you, looking back, that what matters is both of those girls are adults now. They're very normal. They're very well educated. They don't have all kinds of emotional problems. And, I don't care that I ruined my credit and had to start all over, or that we didn't have stuff, all those things that you worry about right now. I just want to say, when you look back on this, the only thing that's going to matter is that you've got these kids and you're raising them the way God intended, and everything else just, is minimal. And so I don't know if I actually answered your question, but you have to think big picture during those struggles. you just have to and think, God gave me these kids. He'll give us the food we need and the clothes that we need to wear and the gas for the car and all of that stuff. He will.
Yep. He got you through it. And,
Yeah.
you talk about how it was messy. And of course it's messy because life is messy. We live in a messy world that's full of pain and full of angst and full of unsurety. Right now you look at what we're living through in our country and we're all experiencing that to one level, one degree or another. And, but the Lord got you through it. And I love that 20 years later, you can look back and say, it was hard. It was really hard, but it was worth it. You have no regrets.
I cried a lot. I will say
sure.
that it was not easy.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago.
Right. And you have no regrets in what you did and the decision to keep your girls home with you. And I think you really, I love that you're intentional about wanting to be with them and help get them through that time because gosh, I can't imagine going through such a traumatic period of life as a young child and then being sent off to school, especially after having been homeschooled and been home with you. That's a scary thing for a kid. I mean, how do you even explain to them, well, I'm doing what's best for you. So I'm going to go put you in school with someone else who you don't know, just so that we can put food on the table.
That's exactly how I looked at it. And God still put food on the table.
That's
every single day.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute.
I have a hair that keeps blowing in my face.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. We are back with Nikki. We were talking about being a single parent homeschooler and just trusting the Lord to provide for all of your needs, not just for putting food on the table, but even with education. I this morning actually I was reading through a post on Facebook, and this mom was saying, I just had a baby and I have 2 little kids, and the baby was 6 weeks old, and she said I just feel like I'm messing it up because I don't have time to homeschool. And I think her oldest was 6. She had like a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old and a newborn. And I literally just want to just go knock on her front door and just give her a hug and just say, you know what? Take it easy on yourself. Your oldest is 6. Even if your oldest was 16, take it easy. Yes. And enjoy your kids. Allow your kids to enjoy their new baby. Exactly. And just be a family. And it's going to happen. If that means your kids sitting and listening to audiobooks for the next 3 months, give them good quality audiobooks, give them things that they can do with their hands and paint and coloring and all those things. You do not have to sit down and do worksheets with them when you're in this really tough season of dealing with a newborn and being up all night feeding that baby, because we all know what it's like to have a newborn baby. I was actually just talking, I'm sure I've talked about this on the podcast. I think I did not that long ago. But when my first daughter was born, I was like, I got this baby thing down. I was 31 years old. I'd been around babies my whole life. I couldn't wait to be a mom. And I just thought, I know what I'm doing. This is going to be easy. Well, I didn't really understand how much time a newborn takes. I mean, I thought, all they do is
they just sleep
and fill their diaper. I mean, how hard could this possibly be? Well, I discovered pretty quickly how much time they take. Not hard, but just how time consuming they are. And she was born the day after Christmas. And I remember my mother-in-law coming over on Valentine's Day. And she said, do you want me to help you put away your Christmas tree? Because
I've had some Christmas trees stay up after babies were born.
Right. Yeah. From Christmas till Valentine's Day. I had literally, and I was home full time with this child, but I literally, between the lack of sleep and taking care of her during the day, I did not have time to put away my Christmas tree. So anyway, it's for parents who are in that situation where you're just in a season where things are really hard, whether it's moving to a new home or having a new baby or, suddenly becoming a single mom. Take it easy, take a step back, know your why, and then find ways for your kids to be engaged in other things, again, like audiobooks and Legos and playing baby dolls. It's okay for your daughter to play baby dolls and play mom all day long, because that's preparing her for motherhood. It's good stuff. That is how God created our kids to be, or for your boy to be outside climbing trees or, doing whatever. Anyway, but it's He equips us with what we need. I know one of the things that keeps parents oftentimes from wanting to homeschool and feeling like, well, I can't do it, is because they have special needs kids. And so you have a whole chapter in your book that focuses on special needs homeschooling.
Mhm.
Talk on that a little bit.
Well, this is the one chapter where I don't have my own household experience. I don't have any children with special needs, but I recognize that it's such a huge issue today, such a huge deal. And so I know that parents feel like, well, at school, my kids have a special education program that, guarantees they'll get certain things based on whatever their need is. And I could not do that at home. And so I reached out to friends that I have that have kids with special needs and asked them, so I don't know anything about homeschooling a child with special needs. Tell me what you do. Tell me how you do it. And so I have two interviews in the book with moms who, in this case, both of them have sons with that they're on the spectrum at different levels. And I will tell you that basically what they said boils down to what I say in almost every chapter is that you have to think outside the normal education system. And especially if you have a child with special needs, you adapt whatever to whatever that need is. And there's so many possibilities that I can't tell you that there is a certain magic formula. There's just a mindset where you say, okay, this is what my child does. This is what we do every day. This is what they need. Or, I know that in some cases a child's really attached to an object or a person or a circumstance, so work around all of that. If you have a kid that doesn't write at all, maybe they're never going to. I talked to a lady at the park yesterday who said, I've got a son who, they're trying to train him at school to have some sort of minimum wage job because he has severe disabilities. And she said, he's not going to do that. So she took him out and, she just said, we're going to figure this out on our own. And she just said, I just want him to love God, and I want him to be able to tell me that his head hurts or, so she wanted to just take him out of that whole, let's put him in the system idea and train him to be the person that she knows he's going to be for the rest of his life. Yeah. And I also talked to, last night, one of my good friends was sharing her story. She has a college degree. She was a science teacher for many years, and then she decided to homeschool her children. And she said, I deal better with the older high school kids. Those little kids, it's not my area. But she said, I had two little kids and we were homeschooling. And she said, we found out that my third grader had dyslexia, and that's what was slowing down the reading process. And at the very same time, her preschooler was kind of essentially nonverbal. He chattered and, said a lot of things. And her daughter would actually say, oh, he wants a drink, mommy. But mommy and daddy couldn't figure out what he was talking about. And so she had a child who needed speech therapy and a child who was dyslexic at the same time. And she just said, we're going to figure this out. And she did. So she worked through the dyslexia, and she did her own speech therapy with her son with homemade flashcards. And she said that first year of that was like the worst. It was so hard. But those two kids are graduated now. One's married, one's off to the university. I mean, she did it, even though she didn't know what she was doing and didn't want to do all that. But she'd already dedicated herself to home education. And so she knew, well, this is part of it now. Yeah. And so anything's possible if you just realize that you are the best teacher ever for your kids, even if you're not a teacher. If you think you're not a teacher, no matter what their special circumstances are, you just adapt to those. And I've talked to many parents who realize their whole schedule doesn't have to revolve around what the school's telling them that needs to be done. But instead, if they have doctor visits or therapies, or just the child needs a special diet, more sleep, less sleep, all of those things, if you're just at home, life is so much different because you're on your own schedule and you're just going with the needs of that child now instead of that and what the school's telling you has to be done.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. I love the story of that mom who she was just intentional about it, because we live in a society where we want things to be easy. Always. We want instant gratification. We want things to be easy. We don't want to have to really work to make things happen. And sometimes things come very easily, but sometimes they don't. And I feel like as a culture, we kind of give a, thumbs up to, well, if it's not really easy, then just find an easier way. But that easier way is not always the right way. And so when it comes to having a child that has special needs, it is harder to homeschool a child with special needs. For sure, it is. Just like it is hard to homeschool a child as a single parent. And sometimes we have to really step back and just say, you know what, this is going to be hard, like really, really, really hard, but it's worth it. And so I'm going to put in countless hours of, blood, sweat, and tears to do this thing that's best for my child. And like you said, we, the parent, are the best teacher for our child. Yes. No one else, no matter what their special needs are, no one else is going to love your child and teach them the way that you can, because you know them better than anyone else does. Even those who are, quote unquote, qualified to teach them. And we did an interview for Schoolhouse Rock, the movie, years ago with a couple who had a son who was born deaf. And of course, all the doctors said, well, you've got to put him in this special school when he gets a little bit older. And so they did. And they just realized pretty quickly that it was not working. And she said, I didn't know anything about how to deal with a deaf child. But she said, I was his mom and I loved him, and I loved him more than anyone. And so I had to figure it out. And it was really, really hard. But it's pretty amazing to see how this child has turned out, because his parents just said, we're going to do the hard thing. Sometimes as Christians and sometimes as parents, we have to do the really hard thing.
We do.
But it's really, really worth it in the end. So yeah, it's a tough place to be, for sure. And
I don't try to make it simplified by saying, oh, it's easy, you can do this.
Right.
A lot of this stuff is not easy, but not only does God change our children when we tackle the hard stuff, he changes us, and we become much better people by trying to do those things that are hard. I mean, it's just like working out. If you want to have a healthier body, you've got to put something into it. And a lot of people are willing to do that. And so we've got to also be willing to put the work into our children.
Yes, absolutely. And for those who are listening who have a special needs child, because I know that there are many of you, we did a podcast quite some time ago, and I will link to it in the show notes, but it's by Peggy Ployer, and she's the founder of SPED Homeschool. And it is a homeschool organization ministry that caters specifically to homeschool parents with special needs children. And they are doing amazing work. So it's spedhomeschool.com, I think is the website. It might be .org, but I will put that in the show notes so you can link to that. And I'll also put a link back to the episode that I did with Peggy, because there's so much encouragement in that episode. Yes. And I think that you'll really be blessed by it. Let's end this, because I still have so many more questions for you, but we're out of time again. So can you come back for a third part of the podcast?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, let's do that. So let's close this one out. We'll be back again tomorrow and finish this conversation, because there's more I want to talk about, because I want everyone to know that anyone can homeschool. Again, you can find Nikki at nickitruesdell.com, and it's NICKITRUESDELL.com. And she is the author of the new book called Anyone Can Homeschool, Overcoming Obstacles. I can say that right. Overcoming Obstacles to Home Education. So Nikki, thank you for being with me. We'll can continue on this conversation tomorrow.
Good. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And thank you guys for listening. You are such a blessing to us. Please, please, please take the time to leave a review for the podcast. We would love it if you would do that. I know it's such a hassle, but it really does help get the word out about the podcast. And also, if the Lord puts it on your heart, we would love for you to be praying for us in the ministry of Schoolhouse Rocked, and consider just financial support. We are supported fully by sponsors and just regular people, regular moms and dads, pretty much all of them homeschoolers who really believe in homeschooling and in the ministry of Schoolhouse Rock. So we would love it if you would consider that. You can go to schoolhouserocked.com And you can make a tax-deductible donation there and also sign up for our newsletter. So thanks for joining us again today. We will be back tomorrow for the conclusion of my interview with Nicki Truesdell. Bye. Okay. All right. Take a quick drink. I'm like, I don't think we have time to do another question this one. And I have more. Okay. All right. So in this last part, I want to talk about, you have a chapter called The Unqualified Parent.
Yes.
So you want to talk about that one?
I can.
Okay, let's talk about that. And then I want to talk about chronic illness, since I know that's something that you've dealt with your migraines. And then you have dad's grandparents and other family members. Is that dad's grandparents and other family members homeschooling?
Yes. Grandparents homeschooling their grandkids, or
Right.
like we said, sometimes there's a single dad, or even the couple chooses for dad to teach. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. Okay. And then if we have a chance, we'll get to the only child. I know that's a whole topic of its own. So, all right, let's see. Hold on one second. Okay, here we go. Hold on one second. Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back with with Nikki. I'm going to say Nikki. Your name is not Nicki Truesdell. I'm trying to put those two words together. Try to say that 10 times. Nicki Truesdell. She is the author of Anyone Can Homeschool: Overcoming Obstacles to Home Education. She has written this book from really the perspective of someone who has been through some very difficult situations in her life, and the Lord has sustained her and her family and allowed her to homeschool through some of the most difficult situations that life can bring. And so she has a pretty incredible testimony of what the Lord has done. So if you've missed part 1 and 2 of my interview with her, go back and listen to those. You will be greatly encouraged. But we were not done with our conversation, so we're going to continue on. I really try to keep these episodes at around 20 minutes because we have done lots of research, and homeschool moms just don't have time to listen.
That is so true.
To an entire hour-long podcast. And so even for myself, if I listen to one and I'll get 20 or 30 minutes into it, and then I'm off to doing the next thing, and then I forget to go back and listen to the rest of it. So anyway, I try to keep them short. We didn't finish our conversation, so we're going to continue on talking about how anyone can homeschool. And one of the things I want to talk about, this is one of the chapters in your book, is called The Unqualified Parent. And I kind of feel like that is how all of us feel. It doesn't mean we are, but it's how most parents feel about homeschooling. So can you kind of unpack that chapter for us?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of people just automatically assume that you can't teach unless you've been to college and gotten the teaching degree. And so most of us haven't. Even people that have a college degree in another field think, well, I don't have the teaching certificate. I don't have that degree. And then, of course, there are many parents who never went to college. And in the case of my own mom, didn't even finish high school. And so obviously, there's a lot of insecurity out there when it comes to the idea of teaching school. Because again, we think, well, I know what school is supposed to look like, and I can't do that. I can't teach algebra, and I don't think I remember how to diagram sentences. And we think of all the hardest, worst parts of our schooling, and go, yeah, I can't do that. So I have to start, and I dedicated this book partly to my mom because she gave birth to me at 14 years old.
Wow.
And dropped out of 9th grade at that time. Never went back to high school, had a kid of her own. And you would automatically think, okay, that's not a candidate for homeschooling. But when I was 11 years old, someone convinced her that she was, and she was one. And so she had my sister in the meantime. And so just a few years later, she was told, you're the parent, you can do this. This is not just about your education or the education of your children. It's about a calling to raise your children in the way that God has as designed. And, they went to Deuteronomy 6 and just said, when you lie down, when you rise up, and just this couple just convinced my parents that it doesn't matter what you have or haven't learned, you can do this. And I mean, obviously, if people don't know this, curriculum comes with teacher guides. And
Yeah.
so don't worry if you don't know it. I can tell you so many things I've taught that I did not take in school, or that I hated or forgot, all of those things. And my mom did the same. And so even though she dropped out of high school, she was able to homeschool my sister and me. And there were times when we got a tutor, or, got outside help, or moved on. And I've done the same thing. And I do have a college degree. And so I really want parents to understand, and I lay this out in the first couple of chapters of the book, that a teaching degree, half of it is like every other college degree, for one thing. The first 2 years are your basics. That's what everybody goes to college for. They have to get those basics. And then after that, the teaching degree, is partly about teaching certain subjects, and it's partly about classroom management and communicating with parents, and psychological behavior of children, and so many things that you don't need at home, so much of that. And I don't know how many public school turned homeschool teachers I know that say, all that stuff did not prepare me for homeschooling. And
Right.
so you can have the greatest degree. It doesn't matter. You can have it or not have it. You can still homeschool your kids, because what you're doing is teaching 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 children, not a classroom of 5th graders.
Yeah, that's right. We have so often talked about Matthew 6:33, and in talking about this, I just go back to that verse: seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness,
Mhm.
and all these things will be added to you. Seek first the kingdom of God.
Yes.
That's it. Do that first, and then
Mhm.
all the other stuff will come into play. You have to do it yourself. I mean, it's not going to just
Mhm.
magically happen. Um, but first seek the Lord, and he will equip you with what you need, whether you feel
Yes.
qualified or not. As a matter of fact, it's so interesting because Abby Ranella, who often co-hosts the podcast with me, she was educated as a teacher. She has her teaching degree.
Mhm.
And she says it's harder. And I've had many teacher friends who have said this, who are homeschool moms. It's actually harder for a qualified teacher to homeschool, because
Mhm.
they have to undo
Yes.
the school mentality in order to make homeschooling work for their families.
Exactly.
And so, yeah,
It's a
you
whole
definitely,
different ball game.
it truly is a whole different ballgame. You mentioned earlier that you deal with migraines, that's something you've dealt with your whole life. And so you've had kind of a difficult time through your homeschooling years, having to deal with an illness that is it's chronic. It's there.
Yes.
Whether
Mhm.
you like it or not, it's there, and you still have to continue on and push through that.
Mhm.
Um, encourage the mom, because there are so many different chronic illnesses that moms deal with. And how do you get through those times when you just all you want to do is lay in bed? You can't even open your eyes. I've had, I think, 2 real migraines in my life, and oh man, you can't do
They kinda
anything.
stop the show, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you can't even move at
No.
all. And, so how have you gotten through that time with your family?
Once again, it's realizing what education is, and it's not necessarily 5 days a week, for 9 months out of every year for 12 years. It's a lifestyle of learning, and that's what my book covers in the first 2 chapters. It's so important for every other circumstance to understand you're not trying to meet these arbitrary standards. Excuse me. And I do realize in certain states there are some standards, there are some calendars to meet, but I know that in almost every situation, it's still a flexible thing.
Right.
You have to have these many hours or whatever, but that doesn't mean you have to do it Monday through Friday, September through May. And so you can be flexible in any state, any situation. But what I, learned quickly, that if we miss 1 day or 5 days or a month, it's okay. My kids didn't get behind. I've talked a lot about the fact that there's no such thing as behind in homeschooling,
Right.
because you learn that it's education doesn't take all those years and all those hours and days, and you don't have to check off all these workbook pages and everything. Truly, you don't have to. And so when you get into that mindset, you realize, okay, I don't feel good today. In fact, I feel miserable. We're not doing anything but surviving. So as long as my kids have something to eat today
Mhm.
and they stay safe, you know, then that's what we're doing. And when I had all little kids, that's what we did. Sometimes I would lay on the couch and put the baby on the floor next to me, and I had a sip of water or whatever I needed. And, because husbands still have to go to work or whatever. And we just survived. And so that's what I did. I survived. And I've had a similar situation with all of my pregnancies where I have that, they call it hypervarus gravidum or something, but it's the extended morning sickness.
Yeah.
And so I would go for months without being able to keep food down, which kind of makes you very tired and very unhealthy. So you don't function normal. And again, we would have those prolonged periods with no school, and it that scares people, I think, to go no school at all. Oh my goodness. And I mean, seriously, sometimes we did not even do an audiobook or an educational video. The kids just played, and I would lay on the couch in the same room with them, and we got through each day one at a time. Now that my kids are older, my youngest is 9, so they are more capable of some independent work. And so I do say, okay, you can do these 3 things today and then go do your free time stuff because you're capable and I know it. And I'm just going to lay here and suffer. But, adjust to the ages of your kids and whatever the circumstance is and realize they're not behind. They're
Right.
not being messed up. In fact, they're going to adjust and they're going to learn to have compassion. They're going to learn to be self-sufficient. They're going to learn a whole lot of things that are not in a school workbook when they have a parent or even a sibling who's going through difficulty like this, and they will learn to adjust.
Yep, they absolutely will. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute.
Okay.
Okay. We are back with Nikki. We were talking about homeschooling through chronic illnesses, and I love your dedication. I love that you were dedicated through difficult pregnancies, through migraines, through all those things to continue homeschooling your kids. And you talked earlier, I don't know if it was episode 1 or 2, but you talked about knowing your why, and that's so important. You have to know your why. If you're going to homeschool and you don't know why you're homeschooling, when things get difficult, through an illness or through any difficulty and obstacle that comes our way, it's going to be really easy to quit and just say, you know what, this is too hard. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so definitely know your why. We did a episode on this quite some time ago with Abby Ranella, and I'll put a link to that one in the show notes because it's such a powerful reminder of why we are even doing this in the first place, and just trusting the Lord to get us through these times. I know oftentimes there are dads who homeschool, sometimes grandparents homeschool, because mom and dad, for whatever reason, they're not able to take on that responsibility, but they don't want to put their children in school. So grandma and grandpa or grandma or grandpa will take on that responsibility. Or sometimes, it's a neighbor or a friend who will take that on. And you talked about doing that yourself at one point. And so how can those people come around? So those, you've got those parents who just, for whatever reason, they're not able to, and maybe it's just for a season. How can others come alongside them and help?
This is something I really love to encourage more of because it's not just about, obviously my heart is for families to be together and for parents to disciple their children. But a lot of times they really just want to get their kids out of the public school, and they're scrambling to figure out how are we going to do this. And so when grandparents or aunts and uncles, neighbors, friends say, I can help you if you just show me what to do. I think we need a whole lot more of this going on right now because it's kind of a scramble right now, especially this year. So many people are scrambling to figure out, okay, I don't like this school situation, but what are we going to do?
Right.
And so if you know someone in that position and you've got the time, or you don't have all the time, but you've got a day a week, or, you have some means to help, I beg you to help. Reach out to these families that need it, especially someone who can't give up their job yet, or a single parent especially, or someone with a chronic illness. I could tell you so many times when someone just dropped by to help or brought a meal or took my kids for a few hours. All those things really add up to help. And so um, just step out and say, I would love to help you, but I have no idea what that would look like. So can you tell me? And sometimes a grandparent does completely homeschool their grandkids, or sometimes they go once a week and help because granddad knows math and science and that's his thing. And that's a huge help. If you've got one subject area that you're great at, or you just want to babysit, just step out and ask, how can I help? And let's do whatever we can to help get these kids out of the public education system.
Yeah.
A lot of times a dad is the homeschooler, and there's an interview in my book where the couple just decided this was what we're going to do. Mom works most of the time, dad homeschools most of the time, and that works for them. And you'll see these people on Instagram and Facebook too, the dads that are doing this. It's different. It's so what we're not used to, but there's no one way to homeschool. There's no right way for this to happen, because it's about families and it's about discipleship and changing the world, and whatever that looks like at your house, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. And I agree with you completely. I really wish that more people would open their eyes and recognize the need that other people have, especially when it comes to single parents or, parents with an illness. Oftentimes you hear, I just this morning, again, I saw a post about a mom who has cancer. She's just been diagnosed with cancer, and it's not looking great. And she's got, I think, 3 young kids. And, it's so hard for these people to get through those seasons of life. And so it might just be for a season where, grandma says, hey, let me just take the kids and do this homeschooling thing with them. And people that you trust to be able to instill the same values and morals that you would yourself. And it's hard to ask for that help sometimes. I think oftentimes that's what happens, is that we don't want to ask for help. We don't want people to feel like we're needy. And it takes some humility to be able to go to someone and just say, I desperately need help. I cannot do this. And so the Lord uses other people to be able to accomplish his will.
There are
oftentimes.
people who, if they just knew that there was a need, they would love to help, but they don't know. And I do have one friend, a single mom friend, who's so good at asking. She just says, here's what we're dealing with now. If anybody can help, please. And people always reach out and say, oh, I can do that. I can give your kids a ride to that class, or whatever. I'll come help you clean house,
Yeah.
People can help in so many different ways without having to be the teacher.
Yep. It's the body of Christ working together. It really is. Let me talk about or ask about one last thing before we end this conversation. And that is the only child. And I know oftentimes people say, I can't homeschool because I have an only child. And I don't think it's usually I can't homeschool because I don't know how to homeschool this child. It's I can't homeschool because I don't think it's good for this child to be by themselves all day long. Or maybe it is because they require so much attention because they are just, they are an only child. What do you say to that parent? How can you encourage that parent?
Well, I do totally see that. It's a whole different experience than if you have 2 or more, any number more, because it does start to feel like it's just you and mom, all day. And that is hard, especially when they get older and they want to do all kinds of fun things. I have a friend that does this, and in fact, a couple, and they both just said they have to be pretty intentional about finding opportunities outside the home to see friends or do things with others. And so they get out and do a lot of different things. And last night at our homeschool meeting, one of the moms said, she didn't have an only child, but she had one that graduated, and then she still had 5 years left with another one. She said, it is different. It is a different kind of struggle. But she said, look at the opportunities to really just create such a custom education at this point. And so when her older son graduated, she looked at her younger one. She said, now what do you want to do? What do you want to study? Let's just do it. And so for the homeschooling part, she had a lot of freedom to just say, Yeah, let's do that. He wanted to study the Greeks and read all the Greek books, I mean the ancient Greek authors, and she's like, well, okay, we've got time for that. And then I have another friend that talks about the same thing, and it's just, help them find their interests, get out
Mhm.
there and get involved in it. And if you're an introverted parent, it's a little bit harder. That's how I am. I'd just be like, oh, do we have to go today? But, look at the time at home together as an opportunity to really connect and build that relationship. And to me, that's the most important thing in homeschooling is building relationships with our kids before they grow up. And
Yeah.
so you really do have a great opportunity there. But I know the days can get long, and so look for opportunities and reach out to other families that have an only, or a
Yeah.
much younger child, and get them together. And you just have to be very intentional about it.
Yeah.
But it is not the end of the world.
Right, right. We live in a age where it's so much easier to get our kids involved nowadays because there are
It
so many local groups, and for the
is.
most part, around our nation.
Hmm.
Most towns have some kind of homeschool support group
They
or
do.
co-op or something.
Or
And
just
if they
people that do
right,
it.
just people. I mean, so being able to
Yeah.
just go on Facebook and find your local Facebook group. Most little towns have them. And if you don't, start one
Start one.
and
Yeah,
be that pioneer who
that's
gets
right.
things rolling. But find people locally. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen on Facebook where somebody will say, in a local group, hey, we just moved here, I have 3 kids ages 8, 10, and 12,
Yeah,
and we're looking for friends, we're looking for community.
exactly.
And you will always see tons of people respond, hey, yeah, let's get together for a park day. My kids are
Exactly.
close to those same ages and we'd love to meet you. I mean, the homeschool community is so welcoming. And
Mhm.
again, like you said, there are the introvert moms and dads who are like, no, don't make me do
Yes.
that. But you have to get your kids out,
Yeah.
especially if you have an only child at home. They need to be, that there was a reason that homeschoolers got that, unpopular stigma of being weird and socialized homeschoolers, which everybody knows now that that's not true. But
Right.
we live in a time where we can go to the park in the middle of the day, and nobody's going to question why we're there. We're
Exactly.
not going to have the cops rolling up saying, "What? Why aren't you kids sitting in the classroom?" I
Exactly.
mean, that just doesn't happen anymore. Praise God! I'm so grateful for that. But find opportunities to get involved with other
Yeah.
families and reach out
And
to them if
create
they're
them.
not reaching out to you. So
Exactly.
it's a beautiful community that we have. I can honestly say we have traveled this country, and it has been incredible to see how the Christian homeschooling community has embraced one another and
Yeah.
loved each other and just become family. And we need each other desperately. We
Yes.
really need each other, just like the church needs each other and families need each other. The homeschool community needs each other as well. And so, it's a great time to meet up with other people and say, hey, how are you doing
Mhm.
this? How are you dealing with this specific struggle, or what curriculum do you use for this or that? And it's a good way to do life together. So we are
Thank
out of time. Nikki, you are an absolute blessing. Thank you for what you do.
you.
Thank you for your book and just answering that call that God put on your heart to write this book. Again, it is called Anyone Can Homeschool: Overcoming Obstacles to Home Education. And it is a fantastic book. I've gotten a chance to read a pretty good part of it. And God really spoke through you, and I think this book is going to be a
Thank
great
you.
encouragement to so many people.
I hope
Um,
so.
where can people find out more about you?
I have a website where I blog a lot. It's nickitruesdell.com, NICKITRUESDELL. And I am also on Facebook and Instagram. And my book's available on my website and on Amazon as well.
Okay, sounds great. We will put links to those. And you guys, do me a favor. Will you share this podcast with your friends and family? It is so important to get this message out and just encourage those moms to know that whatever they're going through, whatever obstacle is in front of them, they can homeschool. They can do this. They can continue to move forward one day at a time, like we talked about at the very beginning. God is going to give you and give them everything they need in order
Yes.
to accomplish his will. So please share this with your friends and family. Share it on social media, text your friends, whatever, and bring that encouragement to them today, because you do not know what mama needs to hear this encouragement, or what dad or grandma or family member or friend needs this encouragement. So, Nikki, thank you again for joining me this week.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening. We love you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will see you back here next week. Bye. Okay.